and good afternoon. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be here among the family to moderate this highly relevant and important topic today with our distinguished panelists and guest speakers. Of course, in the face of current geopolitical landscape and shifting dynamics from China's increased foothold in Africa and beyond, also, of course, we are seeing uncertainty when it comes to the US foreign policy and engagement. The regions such as Northern Africa and Eastern Mediterranean is becoming more and more important strategically for the European Union. And this is indeed these two regions that we are discussing today, youth engagement, but also from a particular perspective from Spain and from Cyprus. So I'm very happy to introduce our panelists today to our distinguished audience. Ambassador Ramon Gil Casares, we are very pleased to welcome you. You are a former Spanish ambassador to South Africa, Sudan, to the US, Egypt, and now Director of International Relations at Reformismo 21. And Mr. Haris Georgiates, Member of the Parliament. You've been, of course, you are a Foreign Affairs Chairman at the Parliament, and of course you've been also the Minister of Finance, who has steered a very important reforms, economic reforms, and went through a crisis successfully of Cyprus. So thank you very much for being with us. We have only 30 minutes, and this will be a dialogue format. I will be asking questions to our distinguished speakers, but of course, I would like to encourage you, of course, to raise a few points and, of course, exchange with you should you consider this relevant to our discussion. Ambassador, let me start with you, and let me start with the African continent. So China's so-called infrastructure diplomacy in Africa is often framed as pragmatic approach, which is appealing to many, I have to say, in Africa. So in your view, how should the European Union reframe or update or upgrade its neighborhood policy in order to stay relevant, but also support Africa's industrialization while also addressing the perceptions that the West is declining?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me tell you, it's an honor for me to be here. Welcome to Valencia, for those of you who've not been here before. Listen, this is a very important issue, not only because of the role China is starting to play in many places in Africa. China is being seen by many Africans, and have been posted, as you've just said, in 4 or 5 African countries, as more effective than we are, as more visible than we are, as faster than we are, and imposing less conditionalities to the projects that they implement. It is true that as time passes by, they're starting to see the drawbacks of the Chinese cooperation. They don't seem to put conditionalities at the beginning, but they put it at the end. The documentation is secret. You cannot disclose what the conditions are in some of the projects. So when the time comes and the Africans have not been able to comply with the conditions, they've been sort of imposed at the beginning of the process by the Chinese, they end up owning the infrastructures of the country. At one point, a leader from a very small semi-island state in Africa asked me, so if we don't comply, they're going to keep the island? Well, they're not going to keep the island, but at the end, they keep on the management of the island ports or some of the infrastructure. And that is, again, creating a bad image of China. What is the problem with us? Africans like us much more than the Africans. They've all had contacts with us. Northern Africans go to Cyprus or to Greece or come to Spain. The former colonial states go to the metropole, and I always say a thing, when they had all these demonstrations with Russian flags flying all over Burkina Faso or the Niger, the people were wearing shirts from Paris Saint-Germain. So the heart is in Paris, even though they told them to wave a Russian flag. But they don't understand what we do. And you do things better than the Chinese, but we don't seem to sell it. At the end, I think, if you want me to put it in, and the minister will understand it well, in political terms, they're much more political than we are. We go there with a book, probably done by the commission, and go step by step where there's the Chinese say, you want this, I'll give you this. And then we'll see the conditionality. We could do that. We could think more on our interests and the interest of the people and the leaders and say, let's do this. And then afterwards we will see what the conditionalities are. Because, in fact, and I'll close with this, I'm speaking too much since we have very little time. We impose conditionalities from the very beginning, but when it comes to the moment to apply it, sometimes we don't. I've been ambassador to Egypt, and we kept on imposing human rights conditionalities, and there were countries who could not afford to do that. And at the end, they were not profiting from us. We had bad relations with the government because we imposed human rights conditionalities, and many of the countries, and I guess the minister knows well, could not do it, and they were right. Why impose on a strategic ally like Egypt some conditionalities that we don't impose on some other countries? So I think, to sum up, we should look more at our interests, see what we can do, and look less on the process and more on the content and the results.
Very interesting argument that you are making, also taking into account the perhaps also enlargement process that is underway, more or less, towards the Western Balkans. And here I also recall this conditionality clause, but also the importance of the visibility of the EU's investments and activities, because external actors are very much, as you mentioned, faster and also much more visible, so you need to catch up in this respect. But Minister, and so I would like to ask you, would you agree this argument that we need to focus more on the interests and also on process when it comes to the advancement of EU's neighborhood policy, also perhaps towards Eastern Mediterranean? And here I have also in mind the energy cooperation, and the Cyprus is leading, but also give us your assessment when it comes to the new pact of Eastern Mediterranean. So how do you assess in light of Ambassador's comments?
Actually, I would agree with the point made by the ambassador, and I would say this because energy policy, investment policy, everything has to be placed in a broader framework. And what has been of concern to me is the fact that the European Union it's like this economic giant, but it is a geopolitical dwarf. This is where we have been failing. So we have very good initiatives, issue-specific initiatives, but we have not been as successful in encompassing all our initiatives in a broader geopolitical context. So what the ambassador has said about Africa is definitely the case also when it comes to the Mediterranean. So first point is for us to realize the relevance, the significance of the Mediterranean, which will be either a region of collaboration and opportunities, or it will be a region of conflicts and crises, be it security, be it migration, be it interruption of maritime routes. So the challenges are endless. The opportunities are also very significant. And this is where the EU has a role to play. That's why I would argue that we need a more geopolitical Europe, and Cyprus as a small member state, but in a sense being the outpost of the European Union in the East Med, is making this point. We need the EU to be more present, geopolitically active, and coordinated. So all the policies have to be part of a well-thought, well-designed policy of engagement of the Union, because if the Union is not present and engaged, then we shall leave a geopolitical gap for others to fill. And this is when problems arise.
Interesting. I think we are witnessing the birth of a new concept in international politics that is a geopolitical dwarf. Because
Yes.
previously we were speaking about political dwarf, but now it also applies to geopolitics. So thank you very much for pointing out to that. But and also going back to Ambassador, to your, we are very much interested in your insights when it comes to. I think we have to speak about this migration, right? So, to what extent you think that the EU is managing or should be managing much better and in a more efficient way these migration waves, and perhaps also elaborate about these bilateral agreements? Do you think that this interest-based approach is there, or do you think that we need to balance?
Okay, let me go back to what I was saying and allow me to be a bit politically incorrect.
Please,
Uh,
this is what we need here.
I think we've invented everything as far as migration is concerned. We speak of the countries of origin, the countries of transit, the countries of destination. We ask the cooperation from everybody. We have to do investment in the countries of origin, see if the countries of transit will be a bit more flexible towards us, to see if they can repatriate the irregular migrants that come to Europe. But at the end, like with everything in international politics, it's a matter of willpower. Do we have the willpower in our neighborhood? There's this neighborhood policy that's been dealing with migration for so long. And about Cyprus, we do know, and I don't want to name names, but some of the closest countries to us on the other side of the Mediterranean sometimes claim that they don't understand the accent of the 14, 15-year-old kids when they arrive to Spain, so they cannot take them back. I remember when I was Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs saying a former ambassador of one of those countries, listen, if I find a 14-year-old Spaniard, I understand the accent coming from whichever region they come. Don't tell me you don't want to recognize they are yours. They are yours, but you don't want to accept them. So if you don't have the willpower, we can sign as many treaties as we want. We can sign as many projects of development as you want. At the end, there has to be a willpower on their side, and we have to be able to, I hate to use the word impose, and I'm not going to say it, to convince them somehow that they have to cooperate, or otherwise, whatever we can do otherwise. It is true that in the case of the North of Africa on the western side, we have a problem of unity and cooperation among the states. So they created the famous, the Arab Maghreb, and the fight between Algeria and Morocco makes it very difficult for them to cooperate on a large-scale project in terms of cooperation. At the same time, on the countries of origin, either in the Sahel or in sub-Saharan Africa, you frankly have leaders who, because of the domestic situation, sometimes don't care very much about some of the people that are living in their countries. And with that being a reality, it's very difficult for us to work. I think we've been very creative in doing all sort of cooperation with the African state, be it formation at the shores, projects to bring migrants to form in Spain or in the rest of Europe and send them back to given projects, but you cannot do this at an industrial level, if you allow me. When you have the numbers that we're receiving in the Canary Islands, to speak of a region, it's very difficult to see how we can impede them from coming just by a political project. You need the political will of the cooperation countries, and that we have to use some convincing, and I don't know how you do that.
Indeed, the political will is a driver of key decisions, and I think that's also, if we look into the current developments when it comes to the Algerian migrants' refusal to return the migrants, also relations with France. So we see that without this bilateral agreement, it is very difficult to have the European approach. And on that, I would like to ask you, Mr. Georgiades, so what is your take on the management and control of migration from the EU's perspective, and to what extent the new pact on Eastern Mediterranean, which is now in the making will address you, and what will be your recommendation in this respect?
I mean, first of all, let us be honest. We were not as successful at the beginning of the migration crisis. We were caught by surprise, and the perception that migration is out of control was actually one of the factors that was fueling the rise of far right, who was the far right has been offering no solutions, but plenty of slogans, appealing to popular emotions, and eventually, through this way, eroding the very foundations of our democracy. So we should take migration very, very seriously. The steps taken more recently with a new pact are in the right direction. They are not perfect. And once again, I think with the ambassador we're making the same point. Much depends on our ability as a union to actually act effectively. And that's why I insist that the EU must act as a much more efficient and effective foreign policy actor, including when it comes to migration, because nobody can convince me that this union of 450 million with the wealthiest economies globally, with a combined GDP which is almost unrivaled, with the potential of political influence, cannot dictate the reasonable, humane terms and conditions also when it comes to countries of origin or countries of transport. So this is where the EU has to confirm its relevance, and this is where our people, our citizens, our voters have to see that the European Union is actually effective and delivering. And it relates to my main point that we need a European Union which is not only strong and cohesive, but it is also willing to take the political decisions and to see the implementation through. This is the only way that the EU can be relevant. If we fail on these issues, let's say tackling migration, then we shall lose our citizens, we shall lose our voters, and maybe we shall put our union in jeopardy.
Thank you very much for this frank assessment. I would like to perhaps now to both of you ask a question that we have been at the Martin Center discussing in the past 2-3 days, because we are hosting a delegation from the US discussing transatlantic relations. And it is, of course, very relevant and interesting to observe to what extent the changing nature of the EU's foreign policy and lack of engagement, perhaps, and this you will elaborate on that with a kind request, affects the EU's engagement in Northern Africa and Eastern Mediterranean. So, Ambassador, how is your assessment of the US foreign policy in these two regions? And what lessons are we learning?
I think the change of the US foreign policy is enormous. It will affect us greatly, all of us. As far as we are concerned, I think it's the same case as in Cyprus. Our neighborhood is so close that regardless of the policies of the US, will be involved in the north of Africa. I mean, Morocco is 14 miles away from Tarifa. If next time we do the EPP Congress in Tarifa, you will see it. You will go out from the window of your hotel and you will see Africa on the other side, see Morocco on the other side. It's impossible for us not to have a political dimension of our relations with Africa. Morocco is one of our most important partners, as Algeria is. One of our largest embassies in Morocco. We have I don't know the numbers of consulate, 5 or 6, the numbers of cultural centers, number of Spanish schools. So our interests are immense. Our controversies also. The issue of Western Sahara, as you can understand it, that's something I don't know whether Trump will get involved in. where we have a difference with Morocco, because that's a former Spanish colony subject to the a process of self-determination, and depending on the solution that you have, Morocco reacts in a way or another, sometimes using migration as a leverage,
Yeah.
something which is a bit uncomfortable. Uh, and by the way, now that we have a European special envoy, maybe we could invite them and hear his opinions before he leaves on some of the new proposals that he's going to make. But let me go back to Trump. I think the problem with Trump, in a more general basis, is that he's unpredictable. So for the time being, we don't know what he can say. He says one thing one day, maybe he doesn't do it, or when he does it, he goes back the following day. But for us Europeans, it's a bit painful when they say that the European Union has been built against the United States or that we're an enemy of the United States. That's alienating the sympathy of many of our citizens towards the United States. And I think it's basic that we keep that link, the transatlantic link, alive. Sometimes it's difficult. I don't know how that will evolve if we go into further discrepancies with them, if they would be involved in the policies of North Africa or the African continent against the European interests, but I doubt it. Frankly, I doubt it.
Thank you. What is your take on, especially from your background as a former finance minister? You must have an interesting observation on tariffs policy as well. But of course,
Yeah.
let's
I mean, tariffs, everything. I am not in a position to predict the outcome of US policy. I mean, I think it is impossible. But for one thing, I am sure, it is yet another wake-up call for us, for the European Union. We've said it again, of course, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that it was another wake-up call. And before that, Brexit was a wake-up call, and the Draghi report was a wake-up call. I think it's about time that we did indeed wake up. And I think the EPP has a very clear role. This is the role for the EPP to lead a European, let's say, revival. We cannot depend on US leadership when this leadership is maybe not forthcoming, when US policy is ambivalent. Take this Met. During the Israel-Hamas crisis, regrettably, it was not the EU which was, let's say, leading the international intervention, despite the fact that the EU collectively and through its member states is probably the largest donor in the region when it comes to financial assistance. But politically, we were not there. It was the US. This we should not take for granted any longer. We are being told so openly. So it's this theme that we are coming back to, Kiona, again and again, that the European Union should become a much more cohesive, effective actor in world politics, especially on its own region, the Eastern European front, the southern shores of the Mediterranean. These are regions which actually are crucial for our own security and our own prosperity. Hopefully, things from the other side of the Atlantic will not be as bad as they seem so today, when it comes to tariff, when it comes to US engagement with European security. I hope that we shall remain strategic partners with the US, but we cannot continue to rely for our own security and prosperity to Washington. We should do what is required from us. This is the role of the European Union, and this is the role of the EPP within the European Union.
Very inspiring. Thank you. But I have a question here. The question is how. And I would like to ask the ambassador, so let's face it, we also have internal problems within the European Union when it comes also to disagreements, also let alone also the institutional architecture, also enlargement. We know that we need the consensus on major foreign policy, on all foreign policy decisions. So how to become the relevant actor and geopolitical, not dwarf, but a real actor, not only in the neighborhood, but in the region that is relevant for the EU. So what are the reforms? What are the interests? So what are the concrete steps that EU needs to take and its leaders? Very difficult question.
Listen, it is difficult. It is difficult, and we all have in mind the ideas that would not be acceptable for any of us, like turning foreign policy into an area where absolute majority would be the rule instead of being unanimity. That is going to be difficult for many of us or for all of us. And that's a basic tool that we maybe should have. And again, it would be difficult for us given the situation where we're in and the problems that we're dealing with. But the second one, and the minister was right, maybe after the statements, especially in defense policy made by the Trump administration, it's about time that we come up with a real defense policy within the European Union, that we fund a real defense for the European Union, and that we come up with armies sufficiently united and with military tools, to put it this way, common to our union, that would make us, I won't say a nation, but something closer to a unity, so a power that people would say, you have to react to that. So we're the kings of soft power, but maybe it's come a time that we should be kings of hard power. And how do you do that? I guess it's difficult, and we'll have to walk a step at a time, but nobody thought 8 months ago that at one point we were going to say 3% of our GDP for defense, and we were going to be doing it, including our government, surprisingly enough. So yes, I think that the minister is right. We need to leave the dwarfhood, or whatever you call it, and go for the gianthood, okay?
Or in the middle, at least.
No, not in the middle. Let's go for the gianthood.
What is your recipe for that?
Very often in politics, identifying a problem is much easier than actually finding a solution. This applies in this case. Also, we know that the European Union is this unique entity, not a unitary state. So we have to operate with what we have. But I did refer to a few of our, let's say, of our shortcomings. Let us not omit our great achievements as a European Union, which show the road. Because what we have achieved in the history of European integration is nothing short of amazing. The banking union, the fact that we are now engaged in this global trade crisis as a union with one voice. These are tremendous accomplishments, and what we must do is continue the political struggle. There is no other way. We have to show leadership. We have to win the hearts and minds of our citizens. We have to do the difficult political work on every level. We need a strong EPP. I think this is yet another prerequisite. And we need to fight it out, because our future actually depends on succeeding on this front as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think these are the conclusions that we needed, this forward-looking, optimist, but also realist conclusions for the EPP summit that is ongoing. Historic developments. I think that our conclusions also hopefully will serve to the future debates. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists for today's event and discussion. Thank you very much.